Hey everybody, and welcome back. So in the last segment, we've had lots of audio stuff that we've got working. We've got MIDI working. We've got pitch detection using your microphone working. We've also played with Tone.js against a web component keyboard. So not a lot of this stuff was really relevant to web components, with the exception of the amazing keyboard component, of course. I wanted to introduce you all to a concept in Lit 2, if you haven't tried it out, called reactive controllers. So reactive controllers are amazing. I went over them a little bit in the show and tell in this episode, but let's pull all of this stuff together, get it working with reactive controllers so we can use it in an actual application that I'll show you at the end of this. First, we're going to need to install Lit. We haven't used it in our explorations in these demos yet. So let's pop Google's Lit in our package.json right now. All right, there it is, and we'll give it an npm install here. This is really all we need is Lit. Now, with that installed and that going for us, let's create a brand new HTML demo file. So we're going to call it lit app.html. Now, since I am showcasing reactive controllers, I'm going to call this demo Lit Reactive. Now, there's not too much I want to add here, so I'm just going to blast it in all at once. So I'm going to connect to a script, a JavaScript called litapp.js. So this is going to be our main application. I'm going to load it up with a bunch of different components because they're all going to be tiny. But so this Lit app is going to be powering our application and all of our components. And other than that, we're just going to add a style tag, make the body full size, no margins or anything. And yeah, we're going to have that Lit app component that's going to power our entire demo. Now, I'm sure you can guess we need that JavaScript file. That's the very next thing we're going to do. So lit app.js. Now, right off the top, we're going to import some things we're going to need. So we're going to need lit HTML. We're going to need to deal with CSS, and we're going to need lit element to extend our HTML element to make these components that we're going to use. And then, of course, we're going to want the piano keys. Now, the very first thing I want to add is our Lit app. So our Lit app is right here. I've already added a bunch of styles. It's just going to take 100% of the available width and height. I'm going to style all the elements within with flexbox container, give some border and padding so they're spread out and they look contained in terms of their style, because I want things to be clear where our components are. It's not going to look pretty. I just want it to be clear. And so from there, we're going to render out a main dashboard. So our dashboard is just going to have information about all the audio sources that we're taking in all at once, and then we're going to break things out with the virtual keyboard, the web component keyboard we have, show off the microphone, and show off our MIDI stuff. So these are not well-named components. MIDI is kind of an odd name. You need that hyphen because it's a web component. Now, of course, to make this app functional, we need to give it a tag. We need to define that custom element tag. So lit app is going to be our lit app constructor. So now let's define this dashboard component. This dashboard component right here. So yeah, let's blast this in there as well. So dashboard extends lit element, so it's going to be a lit element web component. And I'm going to give this component a flex direction of columns, so it'll get laid out from top to bottom. And then what I want to see is I'm going to have a header that says all of my inputs, and then I'm going to list those out. So I'm going to list the current note that's playing from any input. And then I'm going to break things out. I'm going to say, what's the microphone playing? What note is that microphone playing? What note is our MIDI, our hardware keyboard playing? And then what note is our virtual keyboard playing? So I've broken these all out and combined them all right up here. And we're going to repeat this information in several places. This is to showcase the reactive controllers we're adding into this. So that's our dashboard for now. And before I forget, we need to define our tag, our dashboard tag. But let's move on to our microphone next. So our microphone, let's pop that in now. As you can see, I am not doing things in a very good way. I am just, I already have 3 of these components in this one JavaScript file. I'm just adding these together because it's just a demo. So I'm not even exporting the class here because it's all getting used together. Normally this would be much different. We'd have some code separation and get a little more organized, but Here's our microphone, and the main thing I want to do here is style the canvas. Now, I didn't set the flex direction because I want things to flow left to right on this one, so I don't need to define. That's the default behavior, but I want to style our canvas a little bit just to let you know it's there before it's on. But other than that, I have a header that says microphone. Let's label our component, and then a button to toggle the microphone on or off, and then I want to have a display that says, is it active? Is the microphone turned on? Are we listening? And then what is the note that the microphone is playing? Now, this note, you'll remember we are showing in the dashboard what note the microphone is playing as well. So it'll be kind of doubled up information, but again, I want to show off these reactive controllers, how we can have the same information across multiple components in a very easy way. And like the other two, we got to define that tag, microphone. Micro-phone. Like I said, very uncreative. Now I'm going to add our fourth component right here. It's going to be a very tiny one. I'm not even styling anything here, so there's no CSS. But yeah, I'm going to label it MIDI. This is going to be our MIDI component. And I'm going to have a button that says connect MIDI device. So when you press this button, your MIDI device, if you have one, will be connected. It's going to use the very first MIDI device it sees in the list just for convenience, because I don't know about you. You probably have no MIDI devices. I only have one. So yeah, we're going to show whether it's active, whether we're connected to a MIDI device, and what the current note is if there is one. I'm always very eager to jump ahead, and I almost always forget to define that tag, my mi-d tag. But yeah, we need to define that tag. So yeah, there we go. Now our last one, next up, is going to be our virtual keyboard controller. Now this one is going to be tiny as well. I'm going to give it a little bit of style, but yeah, the piano keys component, which is featured right here. This is our virtual keyboard. I'm going to give it some style just to make it as big in the component as it could possibly be. Yeah, here it is. We're gonna give it 20 keys only. So it's not gonna be like terribly big. So yeah, I think that's all I want to do for this. Except, like I said, I always almost forget this. I need to add the custom element definition. So in our package JSON now, we're telling it to load this virtual keyboard demo, but actually we're working on our Lit app right now. So let's load up that HTML file instead when we start our server. npm run serve should get us our demo going. It's not going to be very functional at all, but here it is. Yeah, so we have the all inputs. So like I said, we're listening for microphone, MIDI, virtual keyboard. This will show us individual notes from each one. But then if we want to see any note from any source or all notes from any source, they're going to be shown right here. Obviously, we don't have these wired up yet. Our keyboard is a web component, so it does have some smarts already built in, but it doesn't do anything. We're just pressing the keys right now. But yeah, we have a toggle microphone button. I didn't feel like styling this, so it's kind of huge and butted up against other things. But we also have the connect MIDI device button. And yeah, we're going to show whether the microphone or the MIDI hardware is currently active. Is it hooked up? And what note is playing. And again, this note is also going to be shown here. And they're going to be shown together by use of reactive controllers that reach across our entire application. So I want to point your attention to something that we already built in previous segments, this midi.js file. This midi.js file, remember, this is like a global kind of singleton class here. So it's there's only one instance in your entire application, and there only really needs to be that one because you're only going to have one hardware input in your system that drives MIDI. So it doesn't make sense to have more controllers lying around instance space. So this is why we made this a singleton. But now we're gonna flip the script a little bit. So we're gonna add on some stuff to make this more instance based. And the reason is that I want to be able to use this as an instance from each component that I need it in, but all backed by this global kind of singleton class. So we're going to create a hybrid. And this is not what you need to do when working with reactive controllers. In fact, most of the reactive controller demos you see aren't going to have any static methods at all. They're meant to be fired up as a single instance to work alongside your component and not really talk to anybody else. But we're gonna go a little beyond that here. So I'm gonna make a different folder in this project, and it's gonna hold our reactive controllers, just so I can separate the ones we've already done from these new ones that are going to be actual reactive controllers. So let's copy that MIDI file we were just talking about into this one, and we gotta change the node here, and we gotta change this path right now because it's actually up one folder now that we put it in this separate folder. So let's start with the actual reactive controller stuff here. So I'm gonna start with a constructor. And this constructor, like any constructor, when you instantiate this class, not as a global, not as a singleton, but actually as an instance, when you instantiate this class, it's going to take a host parameter and it's going to add a controller. Now this controller, of course, is this entire class right here, and it's going to add this controller to the host, and the host is going to be the component that you pass in. So it's really easy to set up these reactive controllers. This is really it. So as you can see, this is all it really takes to make this a reactive controller. It's really easy. Now, one thing I'm doing differently here is I'm adding this host, the component that connects to this controller, to a list of hosts. So we're gonna maintain a list of hosts, a list of components that are listening to this global thing right here. But of course, I do need to define that variable, and there it is. And once we do that, if our MIDI connection isn't already fired up, let's create it. Let's refresh that connection and start that MIDI hardware up. But it just does that one time, because once it does that one time, MIDI will already be defined and it won't need to do that again. Now, at the very end of this class right here, I am going to add another function, host connected. This is part of the reactive controller API. So when the host is connected, when it connects to your component, it's ready to go. What's it gonna do? It's going to fire off a request update. Now, normally, we wouldn't be cycling through a list of our hosts. We just record our host and do the update on that one host. But we have plans to update a lot of hosts, so we have a list that we're going to cycle through and request update on each. Same thing here, right after our MIDI message fires. So when the MIDI message comes in, we're going to request animation frame and get those notes updated. So, and I'm going to do this one more time while we're listening for the connection. There's different aspects and different timing we want to get right here. So I'm injecting these request updates at key moments that we want to listen for. Now, there also are some things we want to get as an instance because we are going to be connecting to this class mostly as an instance now that it's a reactive controller. So we have get inputs. We already put that in. I'm going to move it to the top though because a getter feels better here. But we also do need to get notes. So now we have both inputs and notes here. But we're just connecting to the static version of this. So we're just passing this through to the static one. Now, refresh connection, you know what? I'm just gonna change this from static to instance-based because for our demo and for our app, this is really all we're gonna need. I could create another pass-through that connects to the static back method, but I'm gonna be a little bit lazy here and do this. Now, I think the only other thing we really need here, and for our demo, we might not even need this, but I'm gonna add listener, remove listener that really just passes through again to our static variations of that function. Now I'm gonna move on to our pitch detection microphone setup here. I've pre-done this already, but we're doing the same thing again. We're starting with a global kind of singleton class here, and we're turning it into instance-based where we need it so it can function as a reactive controller. But overall, we're just doing the same thing here. We're adding the controller to our host, our component, making a list of all the hosts that we're listening to, all those components, and then making things instance-based where we need them. So stop microphone is backed by this static stop microphone here. And I've done this for a bunch of functions in here to make it into a reactive controller. So I think that's about all we need from here. And like those previous two, I'm going to add a synth reactive controller. Same thing here. We're going to add our component, our host, to a list of components that we maintain, and then whenever we need to update that, we're going to request update on all of those hosts. And of course, we're going to make a lot of things instance-based here that are backed by our static methods that already exist. So that's our synth. So that's powered by Tone.js again. Now, lastly, I'm going to add one extra one that we haven't gotten before, which is a reactive controller that powers our virtual keyboard. We want to press that virtual keyboard and know what it's doing, what notes it's pressing. So I want to send those notes to a controller, a reactive controller, and have everyone else, any other component that needs to listen to it, know what notes it's pressing. So that's why I have it here, but it's not even worth going into this because this is the same type of setup that we have for the rest of them as well. So again, feel free to look at the code if you want. So let's hop back to our Lit app.js here. We can start making this work now. I have a bunch of reactive controllers that I want to import, so let's get all of those in there. And we can start using them. Let's start with our dashboard. We're going to need a constructor here, mainly because we are using JavaScript and not TypeScript, so we can't instantiate stuff outside of our constructor. So we're going to instantiate stuff inside of our constructor. These are our reactive controllers. So you remember, we have our constructor in the reactive controller. You pass in the component or the host. It adds this reactive controller to that host. So again, that's all it is. And like I'm just demonstrating here, this is the form this takes. So we're just making a new virtual keyboard controller, passing in our component reference, and that's it. That's all we need to work with it. So let's add on some stuff. Our microphone. So we'll display our microphone note. And I'll want to show our MIDI notes. So notes because I can play multiple notes on the keyboard. And here's that reactive controller for that. And then the virtual keyboard, of course, we can play multiple notes on that. Actually, I don't know how we would, but assuming we can, because I only have one mouse, right? And so only one pointer device. And in fact, I'm displaying these nicely for these notes. I should display the MIDI notes nicely as well. So let's do that. That is our dashboard. I'm going to get to the current notes after all this is done, and you'll see why. Let's do the microphone next. This is a little bit of a complicated one. When the button is clicked, the toggle microphone button, what we're going to do is we're going to call toggle microphone for sure, but we're going to set up a new canvas, and we're going to set up the canvas context, and we're going to start up an animation loop to display the fast Fourier transform. Like I said, a little bit complicated here. That's our button click. But the remaining stuff is easy. Whether our microphone is active, this is going to be that reactive property right here. And what note we're playing is right here as well. Now let's move on to MIDI. So now when we click the Connect MIDI Device button, all we're going to do is call into our reactive controller and refresh that connection. But I did forget to add that constructor. We've been adding a lot of constructors, so I missed this one. So let's add that right now. Here's that constructor. And again, it's the same thing. We're creating a new reactive controller. We're making it the MIDI controller, and we're passing our component reference. Now, how do we know our MIDI connection is active? Well, if we have one or more inputs, inputs.length is greater than 0, then yes, we do. So active will show true. And then like all the other ones, we want to show what notes we're playing. So we're going to show a nice comma delimited list of notes here. So that's MIDI. I think we just have one more. That is our virtual keyboard. So yeah. Let's add that constructor right there. Set up our virtual keyboard reactive controller. So we want to take action when our keyboard gets pressed here. So let me format this nicely first of all. Now, note down and note up are both events that are generated from this virtual keyboard, this web component. So when note down happens, reactive controller, we reach in and say on note down. And for note up, we reach in and say on note up. And you know, these aren't reactive properties, but they're still functions on our reactive controller that we can call into. Now, I think we have the demo that we need for this. So let's get this going. Let's fire it up. See if it works. We did add a lot of stuff here, so hopefully it does. Like I said, my keyboard is connected, automatically loaded up when we connected this host. And so our keyboard is true. Let's play a note. A#3. And so you see it right here. I'm still holding it down, by the way. And you see it right up top here. So you can see that this Reactive controller, not only is it super easy to use because we're just querying the reactive property and rendering it, but I'm reaching across different components with the same information. And it's super easy. So let's continue on and make sure the rest of this stuff works. So I do have to turn my microphone on, so let's do that. Toggle microphone. You can already see my waveform over here and my notes coming in. I'm not singing, so you can see it bouncing all over the place. But if I hold down a note, because I was occupied singing, I was trying to highlight the fact that it's showing right here and right here at the same time. Now, our virtual keyboard here, our component right here, is the last thing that's connected. So we can start pressing here. And you can see right here under virtual keyboard, it's showing up. So this is all working, but the last thing I wanted to show you is kind of a mishmash of everything put together. So I want to show the current note from everything, the current notes from everything. So I'm going to add one more controller. Now I'm calling this index, maybe it's not a good name, but I'm using this as a main entry point for all of our input devices all at once. I probably should export stuff out of here if it was a real index, but I guess I'm not. But either way, what I'm doing here is I'm importing every single thing. I'm listening for notes updated on the MIDI controller, the voice controller, the microphone, and the virtual keyboard, the keyboard component. So all of this happens all at once, and all it does, it's a wrapper for all this stuff. So when it updates those notes, it goes to a central list of all the notes, and I know what the combination of everything, every instrument I have in this application is playing all at once. So this is the purpose of that. And again, it's just another reactive controller, same approach as all the other ones. So let's add this into our demo as a last step. And I only really want this in the dashboard, so I'm gonna add this, I'm gonna call it all because it's everything. So this reactive controller is now operating in our dashboard, and we can use that to query all the notes we're playing all at once. So we'll add this little bit in right here. So let's do one last demo of our application here. We have to turn everything on, so this includes the microphone, and we can see it going. So you can see the current note already. It's updating from the combination all notes input controller we just added. So this seems to be functioning, but let's do a lot of stuff all at once. So I'm gonna play a C chord. And so, yeah, you can see as I'm talking, it's augmenting the C chord with whatever I'm speaking, whatever it's picking up from my voice. I'm going to start playing this virtual keyboard as well. There we go. So yeah, everything's happening all at once. So you can see, this is what I wanted to do. The main purpose of this demo is kind of a proving ground to prove that we can have a reactive controller or several reactive controllers that operate all at once to bring all of our instruments together. All right, so I think that was a decent demo for this mishmash of technologies we wanted to use, audio technologies, all wrapped up in a reactive controller or reactive controllers. There's a few of them. So I think we're at a good point to stop now. We haven't really touched on the main application that I've been building that all of these technologies feed into, but I'll cover that next. So stick around. We're gonna finish off with a little bit of styling. So yeah, stick around.